There comes a moment in life when everything feels noisy, opinions flying at you from every direction, distractions pulling you away from your path, and expectations pressing down on your shoulders like weights. But in that chaos, there's a rare, underrated power that can change everything the moment you choose to focus solely on yourself and remain silent. It's in that stillness that true transformation begins. You're not running away from the world, you're running toward yourself. You're pulling away from noise so you can finally hear your own voice. When you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your choices, and stop reacting to what others say, something profound happens. The dust settles, clarity arrives, and slowly, everything begins to fall into place. And focusing on yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. It's the reset button your soul craves. It's the moment when you stop asking for directions from people who've never been where you're going. The world has a habit of projecting its fears, doubts, and limitations onto others. But when you start building in silence, when you wake up early and grind without announcing it to the world, when you read, heal, learn, evolve without posting about it, that's when growth becomes sacred. You're no longer living for the applause, you're living for alignment. You realize the most powerful moves are made in private. You don't need validation when you're operating from vision. Silence is a weapon, a shield, and a sanctuary. In silence, you observe, you study, you plan. You don't waste your breath explaining your journey to people who can't understand your destination. You start to see who's real when you say less. You realize that most people don't want to see you rise. They want to see you stay where they're comfortable. But you're no longer living to keep others comfortable. You're here to expand, to evolve, to elevate. And when you begin focusing on yourself, your energy shifts. You begin attracting what aligns with your growth. People, opportunities, peace. In this phase, you stop chasing things that aren't meant for you. You stop trying to prove your worth. You begin to recognize the value of your own presence. You stop shrinking to fit into rooms that dim your light. Instead, you build your own space. Silent, steady, solid. And the ones meant for your journey will find you, not because you shouted your worth, but because your energy became undeniable. That's the paradox. When you focus on yourself and stay silent, everything you used to chase starts chasing you. You begin to notice how much time you wasted explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You realize how draining it was to engage in conversations that went nowhere, to seek approval from people who didn't even approve of themselves. You reclaim that energy and pour it into your goals, your healing, your vision. You become addicted to your own growth. You fall in love with solitude. You find joy in your own company. That's where confidence is born, not in loud declarations, but in quiet evolution. There's a reason why some of the strongest people are the quietest. They've learned that words don't build empires, actions do. They understand that growth doesn't require permission, that peace isn't found in the noise but in the stillness. And once you tap into that stillness, you begin to move differently. You no longer react, you respond. You no longer beg, you attract. You no longer follow, you lead. Not because you announced it, but because you became it. The journey of self-focus is not always easy. It means letting go of people who no longer align with your energy. It means being misunderstood. It means walking alone at times. But the strength you gain in that solitude is unmatched. You develop unshakable self-respect. You learn to protect your energy. You stop attending every argument you're invited to. You become a master of your own emotions. That is real power, the kind that can't be taken, only cultivated. Silence is not absence, it's presence at its highest form. When you choose silence, you're choosing yourself. When you choose self-focus, you're choosing growth. And when you commit to both, life begins to align in ways you never imagined. You don't have to scream your dreams, you don't have to post every move, you don't have to prove anything, just become it. Silently, steadily, unapologetically. Because when you focus on yourself and stay silent, everything really does fall into place. When you focus inward and stay silent, you begin to construct a strength that doesn't need to be displayed. It radiates. It speaks without sound. This kind of strength isn't built in crowds or under spotlights. It's crafted in the quiet hours when no one's watching. It's not about being loud. It's about being solid. Most people are chasing attention. But you're chasing growth. You don't need to be seen every day to be making progress, because the most valuable progress happens in private, where it's real, raw, and untouchable. There's a difference between movement and progress. Just because someone's loud, flashy, or constantly showing off doesn't mean they're moving forward. Sometimes the loudest people are the ones furthest from themselves. True progress doesn't have an audience, it has intention. When you start focusing on yourself, you stop comparing your journey to others. You stop measuring your worth by likes, S or applause. You create your own scoreboard, you define success on your own terms, and you start building a life that's real, free from performance, free from the need to impress. The silence gives you time to listen, not to others, but to your own truth. It's where you reconnect with your intuition, your gut, your instincts. You begin to see that not every opportunity is worth chasing. Not every invitation is meant to be accepted. Not every opinion deserves a reaction. And that clarity, it's a gift you can only receive in stillness. You learn to trust yourself more. You become your own advisor, your own motivator, your own best friend. And from that place of inner strength, you begin to make powerful decisions quietly, but with conviction. Growth isn't always pretty. Sometimes it means detaching from familiar people, stepping away from comfort zones, and closing chapters you never thought you'd end. But when your focus is on you and your silence is your protection, you become immune to distractions. You stop explaining your healing. You stop apologizing for evolving. And you realize you owe no one access to your journey unless they've earned a seat in your future. Your silence begins to filter out the noise. You become more selective with your energy, your time, your space. You realize that not every relationship is healthy, not every conversation is productive, and not every connection deserves to be maintained. In this solitude, you find your standards, you raise them, and you never lower them again. Not for love, not for validation, not for anyone. That's not arrogance, that's alignment. As you build yourself silently, people may talk. They'll notice your distance. Your peace might intimidate them. Your absence might confuse them. But none of that matters because you're not building to be understood. You're building to be unshakable. You're building something that can't be taken away because it wasn't given to you. It was created by you in the dark, in the quiet, through discipline, not noise. You begin to recognize that the best way to win is to not play every game. You don't need to argue when your life becomes the proof. You don't need to convince people when your energy tells the story. You don't need to explain your choices when your results are undeniable. The time you used to spend trying to be heard, trying to be seen is now invested in becoming. And that shift changes everything. People will always have something to say. But your peace is louder, your actions echo longer. You begin to realize that the world doesn't owe you anything. But you owe yourself everything. Your discipline becomes sacred. Your focus becomes fierce. Your silence becomes gold. And from that place of internal fire, you begin to attract everything that's meant for you, not because you chased it, but because you became it. This is not a lonely path. It's a liberating one. Because once you learn how to be complete within yourself, no one can control you with their presence or absence. You stop being dependent on anyone for your happiness. You stop relying on outside forces to validate your worth. You become full by yourself, for yourself. And that's the moment the world shifts around you. Opportunities find you, the right people notice. Peace follows you, not because you shouted, but because your silence carried weight. Your growth didn't need an announcement, it needed dedication. And now, as everything begins to align, you'll look back and realize the silence wasn't empty. It was full of power. It was the space where you reclaimed yourself. Once you start focusing on yourself and staying silent, a strange but powerful thing begins to happen. You detach. You detach from drama, from chaos, from the constant need to respond, explain, or be understood. You realize how much energy you used to waste trying to convince people of your value. Now you don't argue, you don't explain, you don't chase. You simply walk in alignment. And that detachment, it's not coldness, it's clarity. You no longer tie your worth to anyone else's recognition. You've discovered the freedom that comes from focusing inward. Silence sharpens your vision. When the noise is gone, your priorities become clear. You stop scattering your attention in 100 directions. You zero in on what matters: your growth, your health, your goals, your peace. This is where transformation becomes consistent. Not overnight, not dramatic, but daily, steady, intentional. You begin to show up for yourself in ways you never did before. You eat better, think deeper, speak less, move with purpose. You're no longer running on emotion, you're operating from intention. And people start to notice, not because you told them, but because you became different. Your energy shifts. You no longer match low vibrational conversations. You don't gossip. You don't entertain negativity. You're too focused, too rooted, too grown. That silence protects your evolution. You're no longer reactive because you've built internal peace. You respond only when necessary, and even then, with calm power. You're not interested in being right. You're interested in being aligned. This new version of you is disciplined, And discipline isn't about being perfect, it's about choosing what matters consistently. You wake up with a mission, you cut out distractions, you protect your routines, you spend your evenings building, not scrolling. You invest in your mind, you train your body, you nurture your soul, and that momentum, it compounds. Slowly, steadily, it rewires your entire life. When your focus is internal, you become a magnet. You stop forcing relationships, you stop begging for loyalty. You stop trying to fit in. Instead, you attract people who respect your silence, who admire your discipline, who vibe with your energy, because you are not trying to prove anything. You're just living your truth. And in a world full of noise, your calm becomes rare. Your peace becomes powerful. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. You're no longer addicted to outcomes. You're no longer obsessed with control. You do your best and you release the rest. That's real freedom. You're not a prisoner of people's opinions. You're not trapped in cycles of validation. You've tasted the freedom of being fully aligned with yourself, and nothing outside can shake that. This doesn't make life easier, but it makes you stronger. You'll still face storms, setbacks, heartbreak, but now you move through them differently. You don't panic, you observe, you learn, you grow, you trust your process. You understand that not everything is meant to be understood in the moment. Some things need time. And you've stopped rushing your evolution. You've stopped comparing your timeline to others. You're building something real, and real takes time. You no longer need to prove your progress. You're not in a race. You're in alignment. And from that alignment, everything starts to fall into place. You don't need to manipulate outcomes. You don't need to hustle out of desperation. You move from peace, not panic. You take action from a place of purpose, not pressure. That stillness you used to fear has now become your power. You no longer need constant stimulation. You're comfortable in silence and solitude in your own company. You've become your own sanctuary. Your peace is no longer negotiable. You protect it at all costs. You've stopped giving energy to things that drain you. You've stopped entertaining people who don't pour into you. You're not bitter, you're better. You're not angry, you're aware. And that awareness allows you to move smarter, love deeper, and live freer. When you focus on yourself, you realize your energy is sacred, your time is valuable, your presence is a privilege, and not everyone deserves access to it. You're not hard to reach. You're just selective. You're not cold, you're clear, you don't chase, you attract. Not because you're playing games, but because you're walking in truth. And that truth, it makes everything align. The right people stay, the wrong ones fall away, the right doors open, the wrong ones close, not by force, but by frequency. You've raised your vibration and life is matching it. This is the quiet power of self-focus. This is the grace of silence. This is the peace of letting go and growing forward. There is something deeply powerful about the person who rises in silence, who doesn't declare their every move, who disappears to work on themselves and reappears transformed. You don't need to explain where you went. The results speak louder than any explanation ever could. When you focus on yourself and stay silent, the transformation is organic. You don't force it. You live it. You breathe it. And before the world even notices, you've become everything they never saw coming. This journey of self-focus teaches you to walk with intention, not impulse. You no longer move to impress, you move to progress. While others are busy seeking attention, you're cultivating mastery. You're refining your skills, expanding your mindset, upgrading your environment. And none of it is loud. None of it is for show. It's all rooted in purpose. That's what makes it powerful. It's real. It's grounded. It's not for likes, not for applause. It's for you. Your silence isn't passive. It's strategic. While others waste time announcing their every goal, you execute. You let them wonder, let them assume, let them question, because while they're watching, you're winning. Quietly, patiently, with grace. You're not in competition with anyone else. You're in alignment with your vision. You've stopped measuring your life by external metrics. Instead, you measure your peace, your consistency, your self-respect. And with that comes a level of self-control that few possess. You don't argue about your worth. You walk in it. You don't react to everything. You choose your battles. You don't entertain chaos. You guard your energy. That level of control, of restraint, of inner focus, it makes you a force. Not loud, not aggressive, but undeniable. As you evolve in silence, you begin to release attachment to outcomes. You do the work because it's who you are, not because you need to prove anything. You fall in love with the process. The early mornings, the late nights, the sacrifices no one sees. You understand that success isn't a moment, it's a lifestyle. It's built in the everyday decisions, the small wins, the quiet commitments. That commitment to growth becomes your anchor. You don't fold under pressure. You don't get distracted by noise. You've trained yourself to focus relentlessly. When others are distracted by opinions, trends, gossip, you're building, you're reading, meditating, planning, executing. You've developed tunnel vision, not because you're closed off, but because you're dialed in. This level of focus requires boundaries. You can no longer say yes to everything. You no longer entertain meaningless conversations. You don't allow everyone access to your space. You've learned that not all energy is welcome. Some people drain you simply by existing in your environment. And because you're so focused on your own evolution, you no longer tolerate anything that disrupts your peace. Silence gives you clarity, but it also gives you control. You're no longer emotionally reactive. You've developed emotional intelligence. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need to be heard in every room. You don't need to defend yourself. You've mastered the art of letting your life speak for you. You've understood that silence is not weakness, it's strength under control. It's wisdom in motion. And that silent discipline pays off. People begin to feel your presence before you even speak. Your energy enters the room before you do. You've become magnetic, not because you're loud, but because you're aligned. Your silence isn't empty. It's full of power, purpose, and intention. You begin to realize the world gives to those who build in silence. The money comes, the peace arrives, the love aligns, the breakthroughs appear, not because you forced them, but because you focused. You stopped being everywhere. You stopped talking to everyone. You stopped explaining yourself. And in that solitude, you found everything. And now the world sees the glow, but they don't know the story. They don't know the nights you cried in silence, the days you fought to stay focused, the moments you almost quit. But that's the beauty of this journey. The struggle was yours. The growth is yours. And the rewards, they'll be yours too. Quietly, fully, deservedly. You didn't rise by shouting. You rose by showing up for yourself. Every day, without applause, without recognition, just quiet discipline. And now, everything is beginning to fall into place. Not because of luck, but because of focus, because of silence, because of self-respect. This is what happens when you prioritize peace over popularity, purpose over attention, growth over noise. You've done the work, you've embraced the silence, sacrificed distractions, stayed focused, and now everything is beginning to move. Slowly at first, then suddenly, the opportunities arrive, the right people show up, your energy starts speaking louder than your voice ever did, and you realize this is what it means when they say, everything falls into place, not because you forced it, but because you aligned with it. When you focused on yourself and chose silence over noise, you allowed the universe to catch up to the version of you that was always meant to exist. This isn't just about success, it's about alignment, it's about inner peace, about waking up without anxiety because you're no longer living in reaction mode, about walking through life with calm confidence because you know who you are and where you're going. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to control every outcome. You've learned to trust your process, trust your pace, trust your preparation. You're not looking left or right anymore. You're looking within. There's a flow to this phase of your life. Things begin to happen without struggle. That's not magic, it's the reward of years of silent effort. People wonder how you got here. They don't see the chapters you never shared, the early mornings, the lonely nights, the battles no one witnessed. But you carry that quiet power. You walk with that humble confidence. You're not bitter, you're better. You're not loud, you're rooted. And now that you've arrived here, you protect this peace with your life. You don't allow everyone in. You no longer explain your boundaries, you enforce them. You no longer seek understanding from those committed to confusion. You're done begging people to see your worth. You are the validation, you are the confirmation. And because you are full from within, nothing outside can shake you. You've realized attention is cheap, alignment is priceless. You no longer chase moments of recognition. You build legacies of meaning. You're not interested in popularity, you're obsessed with purpose. You'd rather be unknown and fulfilled than visible and empty. And that quiet decision is why your life is now a reflection of your discipline, not your desires, not your doubts, but your decisions. This is the reward of silence. You've curated your energy, strengthened your mind, aligned your habits, and now your environment is rising to meet you. You don't need to post every win. Why? I don't need to document every detail. You live for yourself now, not for the lens. You're finally free, not because you escaped the world, but because you found yourself within it. You now understand that silence doesn't just protect your peace, it attracts the right kind of attention, the kind that's genuine, the kind that's aligned, the kind that doesn't demand explanation, just recognition. People will feel the change before they hear about it. They'll notice you stopped seeking approval, stopped reacting, stopped needing them. And that shift, it draws power, respect, and opportunities. You've become unshakable, not because life stopped testing you, but because you stopped folding. You've built resilience in the quiet. You've created habits that serve your future. You've become a guardian of your vision. You no longer ask, why me? You ask, what's next? You're no longer fueled by emotions. You're powered by principles. You don't act out of fear. You move in faith. You've mastered the art of becoming the type of person who doesn't need to tell the world they're different. Their presence confirms it. Your silence is your message. Your results are your proof. You don't chase clout. You chase clarity. You don't respond to noise. You rise above it. Because in a world desperate for attention, you've chosen alignment. In a time obsessed with performance, you've chosen purpose. And now, as everything falls into place, you know this is just the beginning. You're not finished, you're just starting. But now you're not rushing, you're not searching. You're simply attracting what already belongs to the person you've become. You're walking into rooms you used to pray for, having conversations you once dreamed of, creating a life that only makes sense to someone who's seen your silence. This is your time, not to prove, but to be, not to shout, but to live. Not to convince, but to evolve. You've focused on yourself. You've stayed silent. You've let your growth become your voice. And now you've become unstoppable, not in noise, but in peace. Not in chaos, but in calm. Not in proving, but in becoming. And the truth is, this is the greatest revenge, the sweetest reward, the realest success. When you focus on yourself and stay silent, everything, yes, everything truly falls into place